Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Beyond the Veil Tarot and Astrology. My name is Candice Marie. Thanks for joining me. Back at it with another video. We've got an extra goodie for you guys. This week, I brought my friend Donny Lim back, Donny Lim of Alchemy Light. He is joining us to talk all about Venus and Mars in light of Libra season, Venus returns. Welcome back, Donny.
Thank you so much. I didn't expect myself to be back that soon. But it seems like this time of the year is pretty, I would say, a nice opening to talk about this topic regarding Venus and Mars return. And that's because we've got Mars retrograde in the sign of Gemini. And by the way, the sign of Gemini is Venus's esoteric ruler as well. So that's
Very
a
lover's
caveat.
card.
And with that in the background, and Mars will be retrograding for a good 7 to 8 months, in the sign of Gemini. Why not we delve into understanding the spiritual purpose behind any relationship? And since on the last day of Libra season, we'll be having a new star point anyways at 29 Libra. We have not seen that for 1.5 centuries, roughly. So that's another little bit of nugget, which I think is very, very interesting. And we can examine the duality, that Mars and Gemini energy. And hopefully the audience will synthesize that into the soul's growth process, hopefully. And besides that, at the point of this recording, Mercury retrograde will be kissing the sun at 0 Libra. And Libra, as we know, is another relationship sign. So all these three all jumble up together. I was like, why not?
Yeah, the Cazimi is setting the Cazimi is setting up now.
I think it will happen in another
tomorrow.
day. Yeah. And 0 degree Libra, I actually looked into the Libra ingress. It's not looking good for Ukraine, but it is a whole other topic by itself. And let's stick to right now, since we've got Venus and Mars in both Mercury root signs. And Mercury is in Libra, getting ready to tunnel back into Virgo, that we might want to explore a bit more regarding this topic. So let me just do a screen share here and we can kick this off. So I have actually put the the synodic cycle of Venus and Mars together, and this is the shape that it makes in the sky, in the cosmos. And we're going to look into Venus and Mars returns and how it actually impacts or kind of gives us a preview into the relational development as a marker. And first, we'll start off with Venus return first. And when we talk about Venus return, it is like a snapshot when Venus returns to its own natal position as per your natal chart. And this cycle can last normally, I would say, around 9.5 to 9.75 months. But however, when Venus is retrograde while that cycle is going on, then you need to add another 4 months to that cycle. Because when Venus goes retrograde in a certain sign, she actually stays in that sign for a good 4 months in total. So hence that 9.5 to 30.5 months. And it'll be interesting to find out later on if the audience wants to generate their own Venus return charts. They can go to AstroSeek. That's one of the websites I used last time before I get I got my astrology software, that is. And what does Venus return actually talks about? It can actually give some kind of preview or clues to themes pertaining to things such as what Venus actually represents, such as love, romance, pleasure, happiness, relationships. Venus also rules popularity, and is also the planet that connects you to others on a social level as well. So it also talks about how frequent are your social events coming up during that return. Are you going to have any kind of social context that will like come to you because you vibe together? And also, do you have any potentially important or significant social events that's coming up as well? And on top of that, it also talks about whether you are inclining to develop some kind of creative skills, gifts, and talents. And also your ability to attract money and gifts. That's always nice. And in some way, it also talks about finances because Venus does rule Taurus, the financial sign. And Venus also rules vehicles. So from a Venus return, you can roughly see whether it's a good time to get a new car or upgrade to a better car as well. And we will look at this from the perspective of previewing any relational developments in this case. But you can use Venus return for many other purposes as well. And the next thing I want to talk about is that we've got so many Venus returns, it occurs like every 9.5 to 3/4 to like 13.5 months. So this occurs pretty often, comparable to a solar return, which occurs every year on your birthday. And what makes a Venus return actually noteworthy? Any planet in the Venus return or VR that's closely conjunct a Venus return angle. And for me, I actually refer to an angle more of the ascendant and also the midheaven. So ascendant is denoted here and midheaven is denoted here. When a Venus return planet actually conjuncts either of these angles, angular cusp basically represents a very potent point of manifestation. And so that planet which is conjunct will be very much highlighted and it will manifest very actively, particularly in either the 4th and 10th house cusp when it's very, very close. Like I would say give it like ±2 degrees. But however, if a planet in the Venus return actually conjuncts the 7th house cusp in that chart, this can mean that it's usually through external circumstances that may influence you. Or it can literally mean that the ball is not in your court. So if you're a very much controlling person, then you're in for a potential root shock in that way. But when a planet is actually conjunct the 4th house cusp in the Venus return, this can be something to do with home. I've actually seen clients who've got a prominent planet conjunct the Venus return 4th house cusp will be a time where they may buy or sell a house, or they may choose to renovate the house as well, because Venus is the planet of beautification. So this can be dealing with like decoration and try to, zhuzh things up in that way. But in the 4th house, I've also encountered that may be, particularly if Venus is the one that conjuncts the 4th house cusp in the Venus return, there can be like addition to the family as well, this expansion of the family. And one thing that I've noted is that particularly in the Venus return, when Moon and Venus are angular, there's usually like a baby coming.
Mm-hmm.
So this is like a caveat that is interesting to know. And if the Venus return Venus is conjunct Mars, Jupiter, or Uranus, and these actually happen in the 1st or 10th house cusp in the Venus return, then it's very much notable as well. So that means by transit, these 3 planets will kiss your natal Venus in the sky at the point where your Venus return occurs. Mm-hmm. The other thing which is equally as important will be when your Venus return ascendant is conjunct your natal angular cusp, any one of them, I would say in this case. But it's even more important when it conjuncts your natal ascendant or midheaven. And
what
we will
about
see
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
And we will see actually with an example later, which I will show the audience that it's a very notable Venus return cycle for that person. Yeah.
What if the chart ruler of the Venus return is conjunct Venus? That's obviously significant, no?
That is actually another one that will be hinting at, through the Venus return chart, Venus-related issues will be highlighted.
Got it.
Because Venus is right beside the chart ruler. Yeah. Okay. That's also another thing to note. And the next point will be when Venus return is actually occurring at a new moon, in which there's a sun and moon tight conjunction at the point of your Venus return, because this can symbolize like new beginnings or manifestations, but the impact can be good or bad, I would say. I will want to keep neutral on this because we will see later on with the examples. Yeah. We will see about that. And in the Venus return, when it's a full moon, which means there's a sun and moon opposition, this can mean that in terms of Venus-related issues, things may have culminated from the past into this kind of bubbling up of some kind of crossroads for that person, in which there's some kind of important decisions to be made. Mm-hmm. For some, it could be to stay or to go. Basically, like a course of action will need to be taken in either case. There's no kind of, just laying back and do nothing about it when there's a new moon occurring in your Venus return. And the next point will be when the Venus return actually occurs very close to a solar or lunar return, because a solar or lunar return is like a lunation on steroids.
Yeah.
And for this, the nodes come in even, into the picture, which kind of make things like very karmic. And we know that eclipse portals are usually when a lot of, actually anything is possible. In that case, because of the nodal axis coming into the picture with the lunation. And the last point, when your solar return and your Venus return are occurring very closely together, I would say I'll give it a week, plus minus 7 days. This actually means that your natal Sun and Venus phase, which is the distance between these two planets, gets replicated into the return charts. And this may suggest really like a significant period related to Venus related activities, like I mentioned before. So how about the aspects that Venus, what she's making in the Venus return chart? And with this, I would just like to point out that since this little astro chat is really talking about Mars and Venus return, Venus actually does not necessarily need to be in aspect with Mars in the Venus return chart to have important relational developments that's occurring to you over that period. But however, if there's like a conjunction.
Sorry, somebody's at the door.
Right. If there's a conjunction of Mars and Venus in the Venus return chart in this case, then there can be like a passionate relational union. But I've also seen that it can be a fracture as well. This may actually occur. And if we think about Venus and Mars, in this case, they're the natural planetary rulers of Aries and Libra in particular. And when we think about Aries and Libra, this is really like in the natural zodiacal wheel is referring to the ascendant and descendant house. And if we actually have Venus and Mars in hard aspects in the Venus return chart, this can, if I were to bring it on the most, in the most fundamental level, this can be you perhaps over that Venus return cycle being impatient with your loved ones. That can happen if it's a square or opposition, or there's a lot of fights with loved ones, or there's a potential to be overpowering them as well. And I've not written here, but I've also seen that in a Venus return chart. For example, Black Moon Lilith, if it actually conjuncts the fourth house cusp in the Venus return chart, this can represent a potential presence of a home wrecker in your life. But, but there's only one of many things. You also need aspects to come into place. And so when we talk about Venus return, what Venus actually aspects in the chart, this will actually color like the kind or the type of the relational attraction, the kind of love that you will give and receive. And you can also represent other markers as well over that period. And it's all written here. So I won't like go too much in depth because this is not like a webinar of sorts, but I'll just like to talk about the last one because I've actually looked into the chart of Bill Clinton back in 1995, his Venus return then. And back then, he's got a Venus and the asteroid Ceres conjunction in his Venus return chart. And that is when Monica gave him her Lewinsky. And that's when the whole affair started. And when I think about Venus and Ceres together in a Venus return chart, this can really be like a father and it's like a very nurturing relationship. But because of Venus there, you may cross the line of appropriateness.
Oh boy.
So this can be like very much explaining what actually happened to Bill Clinton, like over that period, because there's, like I've written here, there's heightened receptivity, affection, and warmth. So I'm not even surprised that someone gotten a pretty handsy with, the other, and it kickstarted the whole thing.
Very interesting.
Yeah. And do I have anything more to cover regarding this? Like, okay, if there's hard aspects between Venus, particularly to the planets of, or particularly two planets like Saturn, Uranus, or Neptune and Pluto, I would say, it may be a rough time in which there may be some kind of conflicts or some kind of separations or some kind of just, there's not like ease and grace and comfort doesn't come in huge quantities, put it that way. Yeah.
I have a question. What if, I I go both ways on this aspect just in terms of like natal and transits, but what if the Venus return is like in a hard angle or an opposition to the moon?
Venus and the moon, if we were to talk about relational dynamics, the moon basically means that, are you a mom to someone?
Yeah.
Because it's opposing Venus, Venus represents the girlfriend archetype. So are you the mom or are you the girlfriend?
Yeah.
You're potentially at odds with like playing both roles in other people's lives. And it can be that because the moon, when I think about the moon opposing Venus, there can be this kind of stifling in terms of the affections that you project onto another. There can be this kind of, how do I put it? Potential pity party. It can be because, both planets are really the feminine archetypes and the mother is very much like, be it really mothering someone literally or just like taking care of a loved one. I've also seen the opposition where a client of mine basically started taking care of a loved one who's unwell.
Right.
So like a caretaker of sorts. So that can manifest on that level. Another thing will be particularly like if there's a Venus-Neptune contact, which means that transit Neptune, is aspecting your natal Venus, this can really bring about a propensity to meet either crazy lovers or there can be this kind of, you can be spraying this perfume called delusion when you approach relationships as well. So you may be looking at things through like a rose-colored lens, which you need to take note of. But I've also seen as well clients who've got this in their Venus return, a fairy tale romance actually happened, particularly for her. There's one that I very fondly remember. But usually it's like unrequited love, it's a one-sided thing. Yeah.
You're also talking about like transit Neptune aspecting Venus.
Right. Because the thing is that because of that transit, then it's imprinted into your Venus return as well. But overall, I would say that if Venus is in hard aspect to Saturn, Uranus, and Pluto,
all of my Venus returns are like, well, to my natal Venus is conjunct Uranus, Saturn, and Neptune.
Right.
So every Venus return.
Well, but the thing is that, you know what? If in the Venus return itself, Venus is, is in a more chill kind of placement and aspects, then it wouldn't be as intense. Yeah.
No, but really interesting because it's, it just paints a fuller picture for people who want to understand more. I think about looking at things just beyond transits. I like to lay like the Venus or the Mars return over the natal and then flip it both ways and look at it. And I know you're going to talk more about Venus and Mars, but it really enhances the ability to make predictions for the year ahead with relationships.
Yeah, like for example, your case, you've got Venus so heavily aspected in your natal chart, but if in the Venus return, you did mention that you've got Venus and Pluto together, was it?
Venus, Uranus, Saturn, and Neptune are all within 4 degrees of each other.
Right.
Yeah.
But if in the Venus return, Venus doesn't aspect those 3 planets like you mentioned in your natal chart, then it may be like a breather.
Yeah. Well, I was telling you before we started filming when I had my Venus return on my solar return. And I had a
very
Venus
important
solar and Mars return within about 4 days. And I got married. I got married literally the day after my solar return. Legally got married on my birthday. But it literally played out that way.
So you would plot your, which means 5 charts.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's a lot.
Solar return, Venus return, Mars return, natal chart, and the transits for the day you got married, and see there's like probably incredible stuff.
Well, it was all in my Venus return had Venus in the 9th and it had Mars, Mercury, and the Sun in my 7th. And they were sextiling because I have that natal sextile.
Right, 7th and 9th house. Yeah. 7th house partnership, so 9th house holy matrimony. Yeah. And we've got a Venus return example we are going to look at. And I got this from that person's Instagram account. So from the back, do you actually know who they are? Any guesses before I continue?
Is that Tom Brady and Giselle?
Nope.
Oh, okay. I can't really tell. I don't have my glasses on, but who is that? Oh, is that Bennifer?
Nope.
Okay. All right.
Okay, so I'll just kind of switch from this to this slide. Yes. And so it's Sylvester Stallone and his 3rd wife, Jennifer Flavin.
Okay.
So this chart, how are we going to analyze this will be, I'll be putting his current Venus return. So this actually lasts for like 13 and a half months because Venus did retrograde in Capricorn early this year. So I looked at that cycle and I plotted his natal chart on the outside of the Venus return chart set for his birthplace, New York. And the last chart, which is on the outer ring, will be the transits for 19th of August 2022. Now, why that date? This is because on that day, his 3rd wife basically filed for divorce. And that's after a long-term marriage. I think they were married for at least like 20, 25 years around there. And so this is Stallone's third divorce. So before I actually continue, I just want to mention that there's this thing called the derivative houses when we talk about spousal count. I think I will call it that. So your first spouse will be your seventh house or the descendant in anyone's chart natally. And when you go through legal proceedings to be free from the first spouse, you got to add 9 houses away from the seventh. So you end up at the third house. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
And when you get married to your second spouse, you count 7 houses away from the third. So you end up with the 9th house. And if you decide to divorce your second spouse, you got to count 9 houses away from the 9th house. This is when you will get the 5th house.
Mm-hmm.
And when you marry your third spouse, you got to count 7 houses away from the 5th. You end up with the 11th. And so on and so forth. Because this will actually play into like his chart. Because Jennifer, will soon be his ex-wife, third ex-wife. So his natal 11th house cusp in his natal chart using Placidus house system will be around 17 degrees, 40 minutes of Scorpio. Okay, so it will be around here, which is will be falling into his Venus return 4th house. And 4th house is really the house of endings and beginnings. So I find it very interesting that his 11th house cusp basically fall into this position. This can be one other layer that you can look into it when you analyze your Venus return chart. And I also like to plot other stuff. As you can see, this chart is pretty busy. And I like to plot stuff like the vertex, because this can really be talking about the second descendant energy. So that energetic point will be important when we delineate like, a Venus return chart. Or we can also plot in other Arabic parts or lots, such as like part of marriage, part of love, passion, weddings, separation, divorce, disappointment, depression, so on and so forth. And this will actually give like a more nuanced or refined analysis depending on what perspective you're looking from via this Venus return chart as well. But if you want to plot Arabic lots or parts, I want to tell the audience that you need to have a relatively accurate birth time, because this Arabic or parts or lots can shift quite a lot if you don't know your time of birth that well. And this is also true when we generate return charts as well. So you can't tell probably like a fellow astrologer, like, I'm born at 12 a.m. and the next moment you say I'm born at 12 p.m. This will affect a lot of analysis and resolution in the delineation. So let's just look at what's actually going on with Stallone in his Venus return chart. So he's got 2 degrees of Leo as his Venus return ascendant. And the ruler, which is the sun, is falling into the 12th house. That is really telling me that it's a bit icky in that sense, because when the Venus return ascendant ruler is in the 12th house, there can be a lot of loneliness, disappointment, and boredom. For him, it falls into the sign of Cancer. It may be like, like family stuff that plays up, that he's like, oh, like, I really wish I can have this family together, but I can't. There's this kind of energy that comes along with that. And that Venus return ascendant ruler, which is the sun, is conjunct his natal Saturn. So this really can add on to the separative energy in terms of Venus-related issues. And if we were to look at what's going on in his Venus return first house, we actually got something that is pretty nice initially when we looked at it. And that's Venus and Mars together, conjunct in Leo in the first house, which can mean like on the surface level, some kind of reigniting this passion within this marriage, for example. But if I were to look further or deeper into things, I actually plotted in the Venus return part of divorce into the chart, which is not shown here, but it is in exact opposition to this Mars and Venus conjunction. So this part of divorce, which I've plotted in, it happens at around like 20 to 22 degrees of Aquarius in the 7th house of his Venus return chart. Mm-hmm. So that really adds in a whole other layer if you plot in Arabic lots of parts. And if we were to even delve deeper into things, transit Saturn, the day when Jennifer actually filed for divorce in Florida, is actually triggering that part of divorce, which is opposing that Mars and Venus conjunction. Mm. So it's almost like the passion just kind of fizzled out just by looking at this, because of the Saturn, that cold planet Saturn, like cooling everything down in their marriage. And if I were to look at another part in the Venus return chart, this particular Venus return chart is actually a bit, like rough, because it's got Juno, the asteroid of togetherness, and long-term marriage conjunct the South Node in Sagittarius. So this can also represent like want to free yourself from a burdensome long-term relationship because it's not fun anymore. Juno is basically talking about the time where all the sugar and spice, all the Venusian things has kind of faded into the background, and you got to really like sit together and talk about the long-term plan, even if it's like not really like fun, affectionate, this and that. It's about really the commitment, the not so fun side of relationships. Yeah. And Stallone has got Juno and South Node together in the 5th house, opposing the 11th house, which represents Jennifer. So there's really this inclination of wanting to let go, of this. And I'm actually intrigued that Black Moon Lilith in his natal chart is quite close to this conjunction. So I don't know whether he's got like an open marriage or side piece as well over here because of this connection. And another one will be like the Venus return vertex conjunct his natal South Node. So like going to court to settle a relationship. So all these little bits are actually adding up to stuff. And also I've plotted in the Arabic part of marriage, and this is falling into the 6th house in Capricorn in his Venus return, and is squaring Chiron in the 9th of holy matrimony. So it's another indication that, like maybe both are like can't stand each other in each other's presence, but they have to hold things together because of, they have 3 daughters together. And this part of marriage is opposing Stallone's natal sun, which is his ascendant, which is his, let me just look at, it is his 8th house ruler. So intimacy. Mm-hmm. So part of marriage linked to the planet that rules his natal house of intimacy. So I really can see that they may or may not be sharing the same bedroom. They're just kind of roommates, if even like that's the case. So all these little bits are adding onto the picture. And on the day where Jennifer actually filed for divorce in Florida, the transit Venus is actually conjunct Stallone's natal vertex, Mercury, and Pluto.
Wow.
Opposing his series, and the transit Saturn Pluto midpoint, which is the shortest distance between these two planets, are also aligned. Really, like this green thing that's all aligned is crazy. So they're heading for Splitsville. But having said that, I would say that probably there's some grief, because 12th house Cancer can mean some grief. Because the part of husband is actually opposing the Venus return sun, which rules his natal 8th house, but is also ruling the Venus return ascendant. So what this is telling me is that, yes, he's dealing with grief, that's for sure. But the thing is that it's overall, I would say, a happy divorce, if ever there's one.
Wow.
Because it's also squaring, the Venus return sun is also squaring his moon and midheaven natally.
Mm-hmm.
So there's this kind of, okay, like this kind of energy. That's what I got. So this is what I've gotten for his Venus return, if I were to look from a more holistic perspective. And I would say that for the Venus return takeaway is that I actually see Venus return representing like very small chapters in a much larger series of lessons that we must learn before harmony with life can ultimately manifest. And in a sense, Venus in our chart needs to be slowly, gradually birthed and awakened within as we, get to the stage of wisdom as we get older. But having said that, like I mentioned before, the esoteric sign ruled by Venus is Gemini. We have to see the duality of things in relationships. And sometimes it is not actually pleasant. Sometimes it's actually through struggles or even losing love to find it finally in our journey. That Gemini energy. And that's in order for you to fully awaken and realize your life's true meaning as part of your natural evolutionary process. This is what I've gotten the other day, just by sitting back and thinking about what Venus means to me. So I think it's really even more important to allow yourself to learn how to recognize love is ultimately the guiding light, which is represented by Venus, so that you can perceive, feel, and let her be on every level and essence of your being. I mean, this is what I have for the audience. This is what I've gotten the other day, actually, just by thinking about Venus, what she means to me in my chart, at least. And on another level, perhaps Venus is also, as a planet, holds the master key to our midlife or mid-age crisis, I would say, because during that period of time, we actually experience like a lack of fulfillment regarding our inner desires. And there's like a yearning to express, inner talents of sorts that we've been burying from, indoctrination or conditioning, all those things. And there's also a feeling that there has to be more to life. And with that realization, you may actually take sudden decisions to find yourself and your talents in order to bring those aspects of yourself out into the open. So this is what I've got for the audience when I think about Venus and also its return, what it can be about. So although we are approaching this from a relational standpoint mostly, but Venus return can be a whole bunch of other more profound things as well when you look into it deeper. So now let's talk about the Mars return, the counterpart to the Venus return. And, we may actually think that anything that pertains to relationships, all those stuff may be in like just the Venus returns domain. But if we think about it, Venus and Mars, they are the natural rulers of Aries and Libra. Libra represent we, but Aries represent I. What do I want? What do I want to achieve? What do I want to take action to get what I want eventually? And so these two planetary archetypes are just, you can't decouple it. And I mean the old saying, like what, like women are from Venus, men from Mars, right? Vice versa. So I would say that it will be very interesting for the audience to check out like the Mars placement in the Venus return and the planet Mars in that means Mars in the Venus return and Venus in the Mars return. So you kind of like swap the focus and you will see a whole new or bigger picture of things.
Yeah.
And if Venus and Mars actually conjunct in either of those charts, then it's gonna be spicy. That's for sure. But unfortunately, in Stallone's case, part of divorce is like opposing exactly that conjunction, so it didn't work out from the Venus return 7th house. And if you've got Venus and Mars conjunct in either of the Venus return or Mars return chart, one manifestation that it can occur is that your love life may heat all the way up. Something passionate may come up for you over that period. And if somehow the 9th house is tied into the picture, this can be a period for holy matrimony as well, like for marriage. But however, if there's hard aspects, like I mentioned earlier, to Saturn, to Uranus, to Neptune, to Pluto, then the reverse can actually occur as well in the form of a breakup or a divorce. So now let's look at the same case study, but in this case, we will look at the Mars return. What the heck's going on? So the inner wheel is his Mars return when that Venus return was active. And the middle wheel will be his natal. And the outer wheel will be the day when the wife actually filed for divorce. So what is actually going on? And he's got Aries rising as his Mars return ascendant. So already very prominent, because when you have a Mars root sign as the ascendant in a return, when you got that, for example, we're talking about Mars return. So if Mars actually rules the ascendant, is even more important. It adds to the weight of things. And Mars is actually in Virgo in the 6th house. It's one of the dark houses. So there's some kind of things to tidy up. And when we look deeper into this return chart, let's look at Venus in this Mars return chart. It's actually conjunct the Sun-Moon midpoint, which means something very important regarding Venus-related stuff will happen. But it's also opposing Pallas Athenas, which is this asteroid, and Neptune as well, which is this kind of dissolution of sorts, because it's got Neptune, it dissolves things. And Pallas Athenas basically is like, archetypally, it's about this goddess asteroid that is born, it's the only one that's born out of a man's forehead. Yeah. So it's born out of Zeus' forehead. And also, if I were to plot the Mars return part of divorce, it conjuncts this Pallas Athenas. Exactly.
Wow.
And it opposes the Mars return Venus. So yeah, it's toast. But having said that, Jupiter by transit will be moving back to around these degrees in late November 2022. Hopefully, they'll be finalizing their happy divorce then. Because transit Jupiter brings that freedom, that space to be like, yourself and all those things. Yeah. So this is something that I literally picked up like right like that. And also there's other indicators of like divorce or reiterating the divorce thing coming up. But I don't think that, due to time constraint, that there's a lot of time to cover every single thing in detail. But if we just want to like just zoom through, she'll probably get, quite a lot of money because they've been married for that long. So part of inheritance is on the MC actually, squaring the Chiron over here in the 12th house, and also Vesta. So it's like a T square. So she will get her own, part
Piece
of
of
the
pie.
share. She will walk away with this like with her head held high. Yeah, that's for sure. And, and part of marriage is basically very harshly aspected because it's right beside. No, it's actually part of marriage is actually squaring this part of fortune and Saturn point. So another kind of separative aspect, this and that. But they did post on Instagram that they are still very good friends after this whole thing happened. So yeah, it's one of the happier cases, I would say. And so what are the takeaways for Mars return? So it's actually worthwhile to take a look into your active Mars return on top of your Venus return as well. In order to have a clearer picture. And if you have like Mars and Venus conjunct, initially it may be a good thing, but you have to look at aspects of that conjunction to other parts of the chart. If Mars and Venus are in like soft aspects like sextiles, trines, those are actually pretty good as well. Another thing, if Mars and Venus return occurs very tightly together, like in Candace's case, like plus minus 7 days apart, the synchronicity, that means that the return charts are reflecting the natal phase return of Mars and Venus. This can be a very important time relational-wise in terms of development and socially, of course. So be careful what you wish for, I would say. And another thing is that if your Mars and Venus return, their angles are actually aligned. It's even more powerful because angles or angular cusp are very powerful energetic points of manifestation over here. Because I've also seen with clients that Mars and Venus return, the angles are exactly the same. They replicate each other exactly. And those times that like they've got so many experiences. And the last point in which I've said before will be, yes, you can use these charts to pinpoint like when you want to get married, but there's also like times whereby if the chart is like less than stellar, then it can represent like the reverse, as in like breakups and divorce can also happen, such as for Stallone's case. So I wonder if we want to touch on more examples. So I've got Adam Levine, what happened to him regarding him and the Instagram model. We've got the Duke and Duchess of Montecito, California. We've got Brangelina, although they're no longer together, but one is taking the other to court. And the other one, just to switch things up, the UK Prime Minister, the new Prime Minister Liz Truss's Mars and Venus return chart, and how it actually plays into the rise of her becoming like the Prime Minister. Yeah. 2 days just before the Queen died, actually. Yeah. Which one first? I'll let you choose, Candace.
Oh, I've been looking at Adam Levine's chart. I haven't seen anything in regards to the model, but I've looked at his chart and his wife's chart.
Okay.
Only because people have asked me. I'm curious your take.
I'm only looking from the viewpoint of him. So it's the same two charts, but this time I would like to just go from the Mars to the Venus one.
Okay.
Because there are two Venus, like if you think about it, a Mars return chart is around 2 years. Two Venus return charts also adds up around 2 years. So it'll be more beneficial to look at the Venus in the Mars return chart first, and then we move, to the shorter cycle return charts later. And okay, so this is the Mars return chart on the innermost wheel. Then Adam Levine's natal chart in the middle, and then we've got transit for the day when all the ugliness happened.
Yeah. So his Mars return was right around the time of an eclipse as well. Right? Wasn't there an eclipse?
To.
Yeah.
Close to.
Okay.
Because the nodes are at 22 and when was this? 4th of May. So this will be in between eclipses.
Okay.
I think. Yeah. It's leading up to the total lunar. So it's still building up in the case. Yeah. Hence the sun is like conjunct Uranus. So this sun Uranus conjunction in the 7th house already is like, oof.
Yeah.
So in the 7th house of relationships, Sun Uranus, he's actually bored. I think he feels trapped and he wants to be free. Sun Uranus. What this Mars return chart actually tells me about his marriage, because he's only in his first marriage, so 7th house here, guys. So Sun Uranus North Node in the 7th house in Taurus means that he probably feels kind of, there's this kind of being overlooked. Maybe he doesn't feel nurtured, and he's looking elsewhere, Uranus, to feel that nurturance, for that matter. And this triple conjunction with Sun and Uranus falling into his natal 9th house, because his natal midheaven is at 21 Taurus, is really he's reaching into the mass media in order to kind of seek that attention, actually.
Yeah.
And then where is that okay. So I've plotted these 2 Arabic points, part of passion and part of nemesis. It is in trine and sextile to the Mars return ascendant descendant axis, and also Pallas is also in the Pallas actually conjunct the 7th house cast. This can actually describe the Instagram model who came out because she is very strategic, and Pallas Athenas is really the asteroid of strategic planning. So very much that as well, of their liaisons on the carnal physical level, Taurus, of their rendezvous, whatever. And these 2 Arabic parts aspecting the Mars return ascendant and descendant axis describes that very well. And these two Arabic points or lots also forms a grand square with Mercury, with part of marriage, and Juno as well. So it really is put with her coming out. This really describes the energy of her wanting to shit on his marriage, and that's very clear.
Wow.
And it's also for clout,
right?
And that's because we've got one of the Arabic parts at 29 of Leo. That's where you get the most fame for. Is on the fixed star Regulus. That's where it happens. And usually does the audience know what a thought is? THOT. So for the audience who don't know, who's watching this, THOT means that hole over there. So, so it also can represent, because she's like this kind of, I've seen the TikToks that she made. She really is the embodiment of Black Moon Lilith. So I got to also see like where Black Moon Lilith is in Adam Levine's like Mars return. It is in his 8th house in a sign of Cancer. So what this actually tells me is that he actually may have leaned on her for emotional support. Of course, doing the most other stuff, cheating stuff, but there's this kind of spilling the tea on the wife, which is also Cancer. What's happening in the family? Because the moon is just right behind it as well. And what's really interesting is that transit Saturn is opposing Adam Levine's natal Black Moon Lilith. So this is splashed all over the mass media on the airwaves.
Yeah.
And this is happening, even more shocking, that Mars is actually squaring his natal Mars.
I've seen in transits just with clients, like Saturn, for whatever reason, like hard angles between Saturn and Lilith does materialize sometimes as other people coming in that does challenge existing unions. I mean, I've seen it with Saturn opposed Lilith a lot.
Not to mention that his Chiron aligns with the Mars return 7th house cusp as well.
Yeah. Right on the angle.
So do I think there's a chance of survival? I don't think so, honestly, if I were to be honest. Whatever PR that he's been putting out is just to save his reputation and stuff. Whatever reputation that he's got left, that is.
I didn't even look into the Mars or the Venus return. That's why I was really interested. I mean, I was looking at the transits, but I think it's also just a classic case of having Venus in the 6th house, and then Aquarius, and Saturn's going through there. So I was really curious to see this, and I may do something on the composite.
And of course, the transit North Node and Uranus is placed in the Mars return 7th house here. Yeah. And it's very close to his midhaven.
Yeah.
Uranus is approaching to conjunct his midhaven. So yeah.
Very public disruption in his marriage.
Do I think his marriage is toast? More than likely, but let's see how long it can last. I'll be interested to know the day when it gets filed and all those things. Yeah. And of course, if I were to apply the 5-star points, guys, check out my last video with Candace. If you plot the 5-star points currently onto Adam Levine's natal chart, it lights up like a big freaking Christmas tree. So there's also a lot of Venus related issues or lessons that he's got to learn. Yeah. And I know that there's more than one that he's been sliding DMs to as well. That's for sure. If I were to look at this chart alone, and if we were to zoom in into the Venus return, the innermost chart will be the Venus return, and Chiron is conjunct the 7th house cusp. So there's a lot of Chiron 7th house cusp correlation, and Mercury. It highlights his Mercury in Aries. So is his impulsive of sending DMs to those girls.
Yeah.
So everything is coming to the surface. And then that Jupiter by transit is highlighting the truth will come out pertaining to those stuff that you've done. So all this are it's hard to salvage, and part of fortune in the Venus return is conjunct the 4th house cusp of endings and beginnings in Capricorn. Yeah, it is. Wow. It is. So he may have to redraw all those music videos with the family in it.
Oh man.
Oh gosh. I hope he learns his lesson. I hope he's seeking therapy, because I do see that from his Mars and Venus return together with all the natal chart and transit analysis, he may be seeking some kind of counseling or psychotherapy as well. That's on the bright side. He's actually learning, because I actually pick up mommy issues with him. that he needs to resolve. It all goes back to his mommy issues as well. Because of that Cancer energy, like particularly it is shown with that moon in the 8th house in the Mars return.
Yeah.
And also, moon in the 3rd house in the Venus return. Hopefully he's engaging some kind of professional Capricorn talk therapy.
Yeah.
Regarding mommy issues.
Wow, the way it's so cool to watch all just like the chart overlays and just see everything kind
and
of
just like everything
connect. Yeah.
So how about the Dutch and Duchess of Montecito?
Oh, let's do it.
Or the Duke and Duchess?
They lost their HRH.
They lost their HRH.
Yeah, so they can't be referred to as His and Her Royal Highness. Like they were stripped of those titles.
Is that the latest news? Because I can't catch up with
That's the latest news. Yeah. So I guess Charles signed off on it. So, now that he's king, they won't have that. I guess he tried to appeal, and I guess she reached out and wanted to kind of clear the air. But yeah, they won't refer to them as an HRH title. And I don't know if their kids are going to be given titles either. No, I mean, I'm not going to say it doesn't matter. They're never going to, be on the throne. And we know that's not going to be around much longer anyway.
But I do see that if I actually zoom in on the Mars return, I look from the perspective of Meghan. But for this analysis, the outermost chart will be Harry's relocated chart.
Mm-hmm.
Because I want to see where is it highlighting in his chart pertaining to Meghan's Mars return, and also regarding Meghan's Mars return and also natal chart, and see what actually lights up from there. And what is really interesting is that in the Mars return, this actually is valid for around 2 years. So from 2021 to 2023, this is really telling me that trouble is really looming for them. And I'm actually looking at next March to April, if I were to summarize my findings, that is toast for them. And who is going to dump who? And I would quite confidently say it's her dumping him. By the time March to April actually swings by in 2023. And this is through a lot of analysis, of course, like I always do, Virgo rising. But the part of marriage is actually conjunct Pallas and Neptune here in the Mars return 2nd house. And Harry is actually her 3rd husband. A lot of people have told me that, by Wikipedia is the 2nd. No, there's actually a 1st marriage. I think that guy is called Joe Giuliani, who actually annulled the marriage with Meghan while they're much younger. So if I count that in, then Harry is the 3rd husband. So a lot of 3rd husbands here, or 3rd wives. So the 2nd is actually the 4th from the 11th. So it's the ending and beginning of the 3rd marriage, if you count the houses. And part of marriage is here. So she'll be strategic about it. And by the way, Pallas Athenas and Neptune together with the part of marriage can also mean the one smearing the other as well.
Yeah.
One having a smear campaign of the other. So it can well be on the way of that. And when the next Mars return, when April swings around, it's already toast.
Wow.
And if we actually drill into the Venus return, that's going to occur around March to April of 2023, in which this cycle is active. You can see the asteroid Juno, which represents marriage, is in the 4th house. And it is conjunct the part of divorce. You can't make this shit up.
Wow.
Opposite Venus, opposite natal Venus, and squaring Mars. Juno, Mars, and Venus all put into the picture in the T square. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
So
I'm really curious to see. I mean, just given everything that's just been going on recently with like the Queen's passing and everything, part of me really wonders if it was just a matter of time until that. I mean, maybe like a waiting period before they air it out until there's been enough time to, I don't know, to let that happen. A lot of people speculated the relationship was not going to work, so none of this.
And by the way, a very big part of this court is right beside Venus return Venus.
Yeah, and it's pretty close to the, well, what is that? 13 degrees. I mean, it's still it's still 10th. It's visible.
Right.
Yeah, and the Neptune opposition and the Juno opposition. For me, that's really significant too. The Venus opposed Juno.
So you can imagine just by this alone, picking up this Venus return Mars and then Venus return Venus. Woo!
Yeah.
I mean, it is something, put it that way, like how the return charts just lights up everything. Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Right. And what's really interesting is that I'm actually waiting for that late April solar eclipse to occur next year, which will happen at 29 degrees, 50 minutes of
Aries. Oh boy.
That is that is in exact in conjunct to Harry's Pluto at 0 degrees of Scorpio. I think that will be when like root awakening occurs, and yeah. But it may come slightly sooner, by the way.
And it's going to be in opposition to that Juno.
Yes, to Meghan's Juno.
Yeah.
So all these things all start stacking up, and yeah.
Wow, and she's got Juno at a Gemini degree, so that multiple husbands. Yeah.
Right. And it's really highlighted here that the Venus return descendant, 7th house of marriage in general. You've got Meghan's Chiron lining up, and you've got Harry's moon lining up.
With Ceres, so the pain of separation, the Chiron series.
It probably can also be the helicopter mom thing that's going on as well, like the the mommy thing that Meghan projects, like all those moments.
Yeah.
So this is like maybe he's also had enough and he's tuned out of it as well. So there's that. And what do I have as well? Angelina and Brad. Okay.
See, this is news to me. I didn't hear anything about them going to court.
Right.
So in his natal chart right now, I know he's getting ready to have Mars going retrograde through his 7th, and that is where her son Juno is. So transit-wise, that makes sense to me. But okay, so why are they going to court?
What actually happened was that both of them, while they were together, they used to have a winery. And so after their divorce, she basically sold hers to this like Russian guy who's like not very good for the business, like trying to allegedly dig him a good one by playing him dirty like this. And the winery basically produced like an award-winning rosé wine, actually.
Mm-hmm.
That's what came out of it. But then due to now the Russian partner and stuff like that, and Brett is actually taking Angelina to court. So that's where the Mars transit, what you see with the Juno thing, comes in. So this is from Angelina's point of view. And by the way, POV. So the Mars return currently. Yeah, Mars return currently. Yeah, that just occurred. And the court case will happen pretty soon under this Mars return. And you already can see that in the first house, you've got Mars, Uranus, and the North Node together. There's like this fiery, feisty, and there's a lot of pent-up angst already going on with her. And I've also picked up this, I didn't plot this in, but the Arabic part of depression is actually conjunct North Node and Uranus over here. So she may be going through like this kind of ragey, depressive period in her life. I think I read somewhere that Angelina allegedly have, was it borderline personality disorder?
Yeah, I've heard that.
And this court case will really be inflaming that Mars energy right beside Uranus, beside that part of depression. And what's really interesting is that in this Mars return, you've got Venus and the Sun in the 4th house. I was thinking what that can be, and then I realized I read the news, and this is actually referring to this daughter that they have biologically. It biologically came from them. Shiloh is moving in with Brad.
Oh,
to kind of, I wouldn't say emancipate, no, but it's more of like want to get away from mom and grow up and do those, do what she wants to do and individuate away from her. And she's going through this depression as well. It's also contributing to that. Mm-hmm. And this can be that that Mars return Venus, which represents a daughter, which is leaving the home. Sorry, we are looking at the Venus return. Yeah, but this nonetheless is like really is talking about the Shiloh leaving home to live with the dad over here. This is also contributing to her depression. And we've got Moon and Pluto right beside each other on the midheaven. This can really represent like emotional turmoil. Yeah, relational wise. Wow. So if we skip back to the Mars return, you can see that, Venus is actually rising over here. And the Mars return ascendant has the part of how to pronounce this? Anonymity. Part of enemy, I suppose you can call it that. Yeah, like conjunct the ascendant. So it's a lot of like bitterness that comes forth as well. Yeah. Huh. So just psychologically on that level, she's not doing very well with that way.
And the court case is set to, obviously, it's going to be going down during this Mars retrograde transit. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And Mars return lasts for 2 years. Yeah. So
it's going to be interesting because it's all like in opposition to his sun in his 1st house. It's going through his 7th. So it definitely is with going back and forth with the Gemini, but in legal stuff too.
Right. And then we've got Neptune. That's where the wine comes in.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then Ceres, a place where you grow wine grapes. So it's in Scorpio, and this is relocated to Los Angeles, by the way, hence Scorpio.
Right.
But Scorpio is like, nah, like both are gonna fight to the bitter end.
Wow.
Yeah. And of course with Shiloh moving to Brad's place to live, and this really is like a dagger to her knife.
This is also like a part of his Venus return, because if you think about when he had his Venus return recently in this last year, Venus was retrograde and it was conjunct
Right.
Pluto. So it was still very
Right.
close to his moon and also his Venus. So it was kind
Right.
of like dealing
Daughter
with the
figure,
finale. Yeah.
daughter figure, providing a home moon for her.
Yeah. Yeah. And like that kind of, I don't know, that Venus retrograde is pretty gnarly for natal cap Venuses, but especially with Pluto being so close there.
While Shiloh is of age to choose, and she chose
Yeah.
daddy to live with.
Yeah.
So there's that. And the last one is slightly different. And then we'll wrap things up.
I'm excited to see this because this, I mean, I know that it was kind of said that she was going to take over, like you said, a couple days before the Queen's death. But it's interesting how the Venus or Mars return can also talk a lot about just really prominent Venus figures, coming to light. Because she's to be a female prime minister. So
since Margaret Thatcher, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So she's born very close to London, but I've relocated all the charts to London, by the way. So the innermost, we will be looking at her Mars return first, then her relocated to London, then her relocated natal, and then transits for the day when it was announced that she got it. And what's really interesting is that if we actually look at this stellium in the Mars return, my God.
Wow.
In the Mars return, she's got a stellium in Aquarius. In the Mars return, in her first house. You got all these planets, all the way till the sun, literally, this whole stack are all
eyes
falling
on you.
All eyes on you. And you've got moon and part of fortune together, which is, and any part of fortune conjunctions are very auspicious. I would say it actually helps to lift you up. And the moon rules the 7th house of politics.
Yeah.
And also, what else do I have? Is that Saturn. So pardon me for zooming in. Yep. And okay, this one. Since we're talking about someone rising to prominence, right? I got to plot in this Arabic part of profession. And this is occurring in the Mars return chart in the 12th house, which is also a career house, by the way. 12th house is a career house, and it is in sextile to her relocated natal ascendant, and it's also sextiling her natal moon as well. So it's forming like a minor grand trine. So the part of profession is around here, in the around 10 degrees of Capricorn, where my cursor is, forming like a minor grand trine.
Yeah.
So this basically helped to elevate her up. But will I think she'll be there for long? There's a whole other question. And this grand trine, this minor grand trine, is actually triggered by transit Mercury and transit Mars as well of the day. On the day when it was announced of her new appointment. So Mars and Mercury needs to really rise up. Yeah.
Wow.
Is the energy. And not to mention that the transit North Node, that means imprinted into the Mars return chart, is pretty stunningly on top of her relocated natal vertex and part of fortune.
I'm interested to see what kind of like a leader she's going to be, just kind of looking at some of the stuff that's going on with that stellium and some of the action that's going on pretty close. You said the sun moon midpoint is sitting conjunct to midheaven. Is that Am I reading that correctly?
Yes.
Yeah. Scorpio. Yeah.
Legendary Scorpio.
That's all in hard angles to all that Aquarius too. So I think I could see a lot of that is like redefining like who she is.
It is close to square the Mars return Mercury. Why the North Node is in Mercury is because this happened last year. It is still active into early next year.
Yeah.
And then her Venus return, which happened on 30th of July. Did indicate that she might have a chance to elevate herself as well. So you can see Juno and like this appointment, dedication comes to her. And the Venus return in this case that happened in the last cycle for her, because this Venus return cycle is over, has got Neptune and MC conjunct. So there can be a lot of prominence surrounding that. Yeah. But for her, she is the female prime minister in this case. And not to mention that you've got Juno also in the Venus return chart conjunct the vertex. So there's this commitment to a 7th house, because vertex is the second descendant of 7th house energy.
I wonder if that also just talks about like who else she's working alongside. I mean, could that not kind of highlight that as well? That she's got some counterpart or something?
Like who she works with also, it was actually reported that a lot of them are from private schools as well. So they are not the relatable kind.
Right.
So that can be the Sag energy, yeah.
Yeah.
And but more importantly is that Venus return Jupiter is at 29 degrees.
Gotcha.
Retrograde. Any planet at 29 degrees is a very important degree. I usually look at is an anaretic degree. And this will give her some kind of prominence.
Well, that's also when you see something like tip one way or the other,
Yeah. But because it's retrograde, I'm thinking that this retrograde, she may not be the first choice. As well. But after some reconsideration, retrograde,
Yeah.
Yeah, then she tipped over, the and that Venus return Jupiter is pretty close to conjunct her relocated natal 4th house cusp homeland.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, that's really wild. But she lives there. or is she having to kind of, I don't wonder if she's going to have to relocate somewhere in order to like serve. That'll be interesting to see too.
What's even more trippy is that Venus that day by transit is conjunct her Mars in the Venus return chart.
Very cool.
So there's always Venus, Mars, like there's always this kind of intermingle thing. Like transit Venus is conjunct Mars in the Venus return chart. Yeah.
I wonder if that's also just symbolic of just people being like a little bit warmer to her in the media. Like there might be, especially just knowing some of the stuff. Boris was not obviously very popular. We've got now.
Well, but if we were to just like look at it further, like Venus just
MC.
Venus crossed over her natal midheaven. So, and it was announced that she became the first PM after Thatcher. So
interesting. I mean, I don't know. I think with with Charles in and Boris out, she's obviously the natural favorite.
I think honestly it was decided when transit Venus, because this is a Venus return chart, so we chart transit Venus activations, And transit Venus might be at 29 Leo, triggering that Venus return Jupiter. Actually, that's when they made the decision.
Yeah.
To come up with things. Because like this line of activation, it is trippy when I looked at it.
Yeah.
So that's all I have in terms of it's a lot, I know.
No, that was awesome.
Don't read me in the comment section.
I always love hearing what you have to say, especially just with the return charts. Like I said, it can show you so much more that you won't usually see in transit. And
right.
So where can people find you? Where is your website and your social media? And what kind of services are you offering for people who might have interest in getting a reading from you?
I do have my YouTube channel, so that's a starter. And I think I will attach my link tree stuff in the description box below, so that all the stuff is in there. Yeah.
Cool. Well, It's always a pleasure having you on the channel. I'm sure we'll have you back at some point, and we'll see how all of this stuff plays out with some of these charts that we were taking a look at. I want to do a deep dive into some of that stuff. I don't really do too much celebrity stuff, but I've been teaching a lot of that in my synastry class, so I'll probably touch on that.
Right.
But thank you again for visiting. Thank you so much. If you guys want a really good reading, consider booking with Donny. Leave us your comments below. What have you noticed in some of your Venus or your Mars returns? Do you look at that? Are you learning more about that? If you want to learn how to do those types of things, obviously, I'm sure Donny is always, teaching on that stuff, or he will in the future. And I'm going to be teaching my 201 in the new year, and I will be expanding on Mars, Venus, and all kinds of solar and other returns. So if that's something that interests you, stay tuned. Otherwise, enjoy the rest of your week. Thanks for joining, Donny. We'll see all of you guys really soon. Take care.
Bye.